Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, What the Beck. Today we are making candy. I had a request for a tutorial, and I was also asked by the same person to show how I follow the patterns without the numbers on them. So I'm kind of rolling both of those into one video. So it's technically a tutorial on how to make this creeper bracelet, but it's also going to have that little technique in it. So to start off, what you will need, you need plastic beads. I have an assortment of green ones and black ones. This bracelet is nice because you only need 25 black beads and then as many assorted green beads as you want. So basically, since it's made with this collection of different greens, you don't have to have like a certain number of all the same green. You can literally use whatever green beads you have. And I just mixed mine up in these containers. This is made with mini beads, but I converted the pattern to regular beads. So I'm using these big ones in the tutorial. And it's going to be 32 beads across because that fits most people. In addition to your beads, you're going to want your pattern. This one's pretty simple, so you could probably just copy it. If you want to make your own pattern, you can get this template off of the Kandi Patterns website, and I'll link that in the description. You'll also need some stretchy string or elastic. This one is clear. It came with some of the beads that I bought. It's not the best string that I've used, but it's what I have, and I'm stuck at home, so I'm using this. And then optionally, you can use a needle. If you find one that can fit the string through it, I find that really easy to use, but you don't need a needle. You can just use the string like that. So the first thing that you're going to do when following your pattern is you need to count how long it is. You don't have to make it 32 long if that's gonna be too big for you, or if you need more, you can extend the pattern and just keep copying the design, but you have to have it on an even number of rows. So I counted these rows and it's at 32. That's just like the standard size that I see a lot of patterns. It's a little big for me, but I figure it's better to have it be a little too big than hurt when you're wearing it. So yeah. So we're going to start off by taking your string, and then usually I just stretch out my arms as far as they can go and cut it at that point, because then it's not too annoying to pull through, and it's not so short that you have to constantly keep adding string. Okay, so now that we are working off the pattern, you need a marking utensil. I forgot to mention that. I'm just using a permanent marker, not that side. So basically what you're going to do is, you should have already counted the bottom row, but I like to start from the left because I read from left to right. And then basically what you're going to do is count how many beads of each color you need going from left to right. So for the green one, since we are doing only 2 colors in this bracelet, the green and black, and the green is supposed to be kind of randomized, I'm gonna just say 32 green. If, for example, half the bracelet was green and half of it was blue, then I would go to the halfway point where the green ends, count that number, and then I would put the green ones on the string and then count the blue and put the blue ones on the string. You can find other tutorials that will show you how to read the patterns. Those usually have numbers, but this is without the numbers, which basically just means you just learn how to see the numbers yourself. I don't know how to explain that. But basically for the creeper bracelet, we're going to put 32 beads on, so I'm going to do that now. Okay, so now I have my 32 beads on here. I'm going to really carefully pull the string until there's about an inch or two left on the other side. And then we're going to bring the two sides together and tie it. When you tie the two ends together, you don't want to do it super tightly because then the whole bracelet will be under stress, and that's just kind of increasing the likelihood for it to break in the future. But yeah, you want it to basically rest where they're not super tight. See, it just broke. Oh my god. Okay, I'm gonna have to fix that. Tie it less tight. This is why I tell you, because I do it wrong and then it breaks. Okay, so all my beads are back on. I'm going to put them toward the end of the string and tie it and make sure it's not too tight. So I tied one double knot and this string wants to come undone. I would recommend you tie at least like 4 or 5 knots when you do this, especially if you're using this like plasticky string. If you use fabric elastic, like what I use on this mask, that's kind of feels like fabric. This stuff is a little easier to tie and stay tied, so you might not have to do as many knots, but I do a lot just in case. Okay, so now that we've finished that, technically we just did 2 rows. So the first row is this row here, where it looks like every other bead. But when you start, you're doing 2 at once. So you do this row and the next row up. So this zigzag pattern is what we just did. So I like to just go through and cross all of those off like this. And that's just so that I know I'm finished with it and I don't have to worry about it. Now we are coming out of this side of the bracelet. I've got the other end of the string in the needle. And what we're going to do next is check the pattern. So in our pattern, we're doing the next row up. So that would be this next row here. Again, it alternates every other row. And you know that you do this row before this row because the lowest part of the bead on the pattern is below that one. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, so now that we have established the start of the bracelet, since I'm right-handed, once I finish reading the beginning of the pattern, I work from right to left because it makes sense for me to be able to stick my needle through in the natural way that my right hand wants to move. So I'm going to start over here. We're going to start on row 3. And what I do, it's pretty simple. I just use the pattern, and every pixel or bead or whatever you want to call it, I just go ahead and place the bead onto that spot on the pattern, like so. Oh, whoops, that's black. I just put them on the row where they go. And this is helpful because you can kind of see like how close you are to finishing the row. Just make sure that you don't have any cats that are gonna step on it. You know, close the door so they can't get in the room, because cats really like to step on the pattern at this point. And we don't really want them to. Okay, so as you can see, the pattern for this bracelet is green, 2 black, green, 2 black. But as we're putting it together, we're gonna be going through the bottom bead and skipping one every time. So we'll start here. We'll start from this side, pick up the bead, skip this bead, go through the next one like so, pull your string not super tight, again, just tight enough that it's holding it in place. And then you pick up your black bead, skip this bead, go through the next one. Let me move this up so you can see better. And then you pull it tight, grab your next bead, skip a bead, and go through the next. And then you keep doing that until you reach the end of your row. You just pick up your bead, skip the one that's already on the bracelet, and go through the next one. And keep going. So when you get to the end, you will have basically one bead that's just on the string and it's not really secured yet. So the way that you secure it is you skip this bead like you normally would, go through the next bead, but you also want to go through the other bead. So you're going through two at once. And then you pull your string through, and that's your third row complete. Now what you can do is mark it off on your chart here. So on the third row, I'm just going to go ahead and put my tallies here. Now what we are going to do is pick up our bracelet, make sure that everything is kind of even. At this point, if your beads are kind of loose at the top, you can pull on the string a little bit to even them out a bit more. Now we're going to look where we are in the pattern. So since this pattern repeats itself, but it doesn't like evenly repeat, like there are 5 rows of plain green, so I don't it's not like a consistent pattern throughout, so I just need to remember that these 5 rows here are always going to be green, and then I can follow the pattern for the other ones. And the way that I do this without the numbers is I just look relative to the rest of the beads, where do the other colors need to go. So since I know that this is the back of the bracelet and it's where there are 5 rows of green, I'm just going to pick up a green bead and attach it. So I'm going to pick up a green bead, skip one bead, and go through the next. So then I have one bead, pull it to attach, and that's on there. So we know that we're working from right to left from this side. We just added one green bead. So we added one green bead and we're at a black bead on the left. So because of this pattern, I can tell that we just placed this bead. So I'm going to cross it off because it's done. Now I can see the rest of the row. I need to place my beads on the pattern. Like this. Make sure for this specific pattern, make sure that you kind of like space the colors out, because the idea is that they're randomized and they kind of don't all pool in one spot, so try to use a variety of the greens. And don't forget that since the way you make candy, it's kind of the way you work on the rows advances diagonally. So if you'll see, we missed this bead up here because we had to go through this bead when we came back up from the last row. Just remember to put a bead on the pattern there. You're going to leave it there and work the same way you did before, going from right to left, picking up each bead as you go, and then at the last bead you're going to use this one. So let's do that now. Picking up our black bead and attaching it by skipping a bead, going through the next, and then as you can see, it matches the pattern. There are 3 black beads going in this pattern the same way it is on the paper. And then keep going around. Alright, so I worked until the last bead. I'm going to pick it up, and then since it's the end of the row, I'm going through 2 beads at once like this, and then pull it up. Now the bracelet's kind of standing up, which is nice because once it's not so floppy, it's easier to work on. I'm going to take my pen, and I did mark this first bead here before I mark that I did the rest of the row. I'm going to just draw a little staircase like this, since we know that as we progress we're going to be putting the needle through 2 beads at once in this direction. So this last one, I put the needle through those 2 like that. And this is going to help us determine our starting point. So once I drew the staircase, I'm going to just mark that I did the rest of that row, and then we will continue. Alright, so since we have this staircase, we're going to look at the next bead that's like lowest down on the pattern. So that's this one, that's the lowest one, that's one we're going to start with. So I'm going to put the first bead here, and it looks like this whole row is green beads. So I will just place those on the pattern, and then we will attach them. And remember that you start with the staircase and work in this direction. So start with the one under the staircase, pick it up, and attach it the same way you've attached the others. And then this whole row is green, so super easy to follow. Okay, and remember that last bead that's behind the staircase, remember to pick that up, and then when you attach it, you go through 2 beads at once going upward. And that's the next row finished, so we're going to mark that we finished it. Now, since we have the staircase, we know we're going to start on this bead, but in the creeper pattern, it's all green. So if you have a row that's all the same color, you don't necessarily have to put the beads on top of the pattern as you're working if you don't want to, but I like to, just because it's easier for me to pick the beads up off of the table rather than just like in the container that I have them. So I like to place them like this. And again, remember to start with the one under the staircase and work picking them up in this direction. And for the last one, again, we're going to go through 2 beads at once and pull it through. Now I'm kind of running out of string. I think I'll be able to get through 1 more row before I have to add any. But adding string is really simple. You just tie a double knot or more knots if you want to, and I suggest that you leave the ends long until you finish the whole bracelet, and then cut them shorter. And I do that because since I want to make sure it's going to hold. I don't want to cut the ends too short and then keep working on my bracelet and then it breaks. I would rather that it gets loose with longer ends, and then I can tighten it really tight and add more knots if I need to before cutting the string short. But yes, so we did our other row. You can see how the bracelet is kind of mimicking the pattern now. The whole mouth is finished and then 2 rows above the mouth. So we're just going to mark off that we finished that last row and place our beads on the next row. We're running low on black. I think I have exactly as many black ones as I needed. And then again, start with the one under the staircase and work in the same direction you were working on the whole bracelet. You can see the creeper face showing up as we do this, which is really nice. This row kind of brings it all together. Coming back from the other side, remember to pick these up, and on the last one go through 2 beads going upward. And in my case, I was able to get through that last row with the same string, but now I will have to add some more. So I'm just gonna make sure that this is how I want it, make sure it's tight enough, and then I'm gonna just, I really only have 2 more rows left, so I'm not going to cut too much, but it's always better to have a little extra than not enough. And then I'm just going to tie these into, I don't know what you call this knot, but it's the kind of knot where you loop both the strings together. I'm going to do that once, and then I'm going to tie the ends into a double knot. And again, you can tie your strings whatever way works for you. I suggest try tying them on a scrap piece of string first and see if that works. And then pull on it and stretch it a lot and see if it survives. And if it does, then that's good and you should use that. So they have their eyes now. So we're going to mark off that we did that last row like this. And again, this pattern is fairly simple, so you can just do another 2 rows of green and then be done. But again, I like to set it up with the beads on the paper, so I'm gonna just keep doing that and start from under the staircase like we've been doing. Pick one up, go over one, attach it. I have that knot to deal with, but again, I left the length of the ends of the tie long so that if something happens and it comes undone, I can retie it. Basically, it's like assurance that I can retie it. And then our final one, we pick it up and then go through the 2 beads upward. And now, this is our final row. We're gonna, wrong side of the pen, we're gonna mark that we did this last row. And then do the final row. I'm gonna put all these beads down. And then same as always, just pick it up and then work along the edge of the bracelet, adding them on. And then for the final one, we finish in the same way, put through 2 beads, pull it through. But the way that you tie off the final one is a little bit different, at least the way that I do it is a little different than how you start. Since you don't have 2 ends to tie, you only really have 1. So what I do is put the needle up So you can see where the string is coming out, right? It's coming out from this side. There's another string under here. I put the needle up past that string, and then I pull it until there's a loop left. Put the needle through the loop, and then pull it pretty tight. And I do that a couple times. So just go behind that other string, pull it until there's a loop, go through the loop, and pull it. I'm going to do that another time. Kind of tricky to see. And I don't recommend cutting the string at that point, but that's just what I do to like keep the top edge pretty secured, like so that it doesn't stretch out more. And then what I do is go through, there were 2 beads that we went through before. I go through them again, basically going back to where the string came out. And then the next bead down, I go through that. And then I basically just do that down the whole bracelet. Go down through the next bead down, through the next bead down, until I get to the bottom. So now the string's coming out the bottom here. So the reason I do that is that it brings the end closer to the original end of the bracelet. And then whatever I need to do to get them to kind of meet up, I do that. So in this case, it's going through this bottom bead. I'm actually going to make it come back through the other side so that these are around the same bead. And then I'm just going to tie them together a bunch of times. And since the string is clear, I don't really care that it's kind of poking out of the bottom. Again, like, no one's going to be judging this super harshly. It's for fun, it's a craft, and it's a creeper face. So it doesn't have to be super perfect. You can have ends hanging out. Same for when you add string, you can have ends hanging out. I prefer that they hang out on the inside, but you know, whatever works. I don't actually know where the ends where I added string went. I think they're just inside the beads now. But I like to trim the ends when I'm finished to about 1 centimeter, like that. And then you're done. And you have a cool creeper bracelet to wear, a creeper cuff. And that's basically how I follow the patterns. I didn't mark that I finished the last pattern row on the pattern because it's finished. Because I did mark the pattern, it's not reusable. But if you wanted to, you could like put packing tape over the pattern and use a dry erase marker to mark it off, and then when you're done you can wipe it off with like a cloth or something, and then you'd have the pattern to reuse if you wanted to. But yeah, the one I did today was not reusable. But yeah, I hope you liked that tutorial. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try to get back to you. I did realize that the camera was kind of at a weird angle this whole time, so I can't necessarily refilm this, but if you, again, have any questions or you couldn't see something really clearly, a lot of these techniques are shown in other videos of people making candy on YouTube, so you can look up the basics of like how to make a cuff or how to make whatever you're curious about. This was more just to show like how to make this pattern and how to read the pattern without the numbers on it. But yeah, here are these 2 bracelets side by side. I think they turned out pretty cool. But I could probably have like a whole arm of creepers at this point. And yeah, these mini beads are pretty cool. I don't have a lot of them left over after making this. But yeah. Yeah. Goodbye.